Remember, there's some pretty important information here in the disclaimer. You might want to give the video a quick pause and read it.
Oh, hey everybody, it's me, Sonic! Sonic the Hedgehog! Just here to remind you that if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button. And for even more amazing customs, don't forget to subscribe to Wake Angel 2001! Because between you and me, they're way past cool!
Hello my friends, this is Wake Angel 2001 coming at you with the second part of Frecher's commission, Conker! That's right, good old Conker from Conker's Bad Fur Day. That game that really looks like it's a cutesy mascot platformer for the Nintendo and later the HD remake on the Xbox 360. But oh boy was it not for kids. I remember because I was a teenager when the game first came out and I was kind of the perfect age demographic for it. Okay, so, despite being such a marketably designed character, Conker, to my knowledge, has only had this one game. I don't know if he's cameoed in other Rare properties, but I don't really think there's been much merchandise of him. I think this might be a statue, but I'm not even sure about this thing. So Frecher wanted me to make this guy. Now, if you recall, Frecher is the one who actually managed to somehow find mint on card Jazzwares Sonic figures, which I kind of refuse to even open because at this point it feels like it will be quite sacrosanct. Although if he actually did manage to find these things at Big Lots for $5, I'd be really impressed. But no, what I did was dip into my fodder again, because although I don't want to take apart any more fully intact Sonic figures because of how rare and precious they are these days, I do have lots of parts and damaged figures. This is just a small sampling. Now, I actually did take apart a bunch of these Tailses, and I was able to assemble a fully intact Tails from these pieces too. So, one of these days, I gotta go through my fodder and pick out all the fully intact figures and figure out what I'm gonna do with them. Like, I could just sell them on eBay or whatever, but I'm really not sure what to do with them so far. It feels kind of cheap because a fair portion of them were donated to me, and it would feel wrong to sell things that were donated to me in confidence. I mean, the parts and damage figure is easy enough. I can just use those for customs, but for the perfectly intact ones, you know, it just feels kind of awkward. Anyway, from this, I used these parts, fully intact Tails' torso and a pair of his arms and legs. And then the other pieces would be made out of 3D printed parts, made from Conker's official game model sent to me by Corey Sonic Fan. I do believe these models come from the Xbox 360 re-release, because if they were from the original the original Nintendo 64 title, they'd be really polygonal. So, well, I guess once all the parts are compiled, it's mostly just a paint job to do then. Like, look, Conker's little head here, he's a red squirrel, so he's very orange. And his cheek tufts are kind of like a Sonic character's, except that they're, like, bigger. They, like, start to curl around to the back of his head. I guess, this actually reminds me more of a Bugs Bunny design. Like, if you could say that the Sonic character's design philosophy comes from Mickey Mouse and characters like that, then Conker definitely has more of a Looney Tunes vibe about him. Like this style that's kind of similar at first glance, but you start to notice the differences if you really pay attention. And the legs are, basically I just put Tails' legs into Conker's feet without socks. I would paint the little ankle transition white to create the imagery of socks, but, Conker isn't a character that has big old sock cuffs like the Sonic characters do. Although, I guess, technically speaking, they're not sock cuffs because that's actually just the top of the boot. Huh. Interesting. And anyway, I'm pretty sure some of you will debate in the comments about the nature of Sonic's shoes and whether there's socks in there or not, but let's just move on. There was some actual sculpting that was involved in this, of course. The torso needed his big ol' hoodie zipper, as well as the drawstrings, and of course the hood itself on the back. Again, it's supposed to be folded over itself because, and if it was an actual hoodie big enough to put over his head, the thing would basically be big enough to contain his entire body. I wonder what it's like when you're a cartoon character whose head is the size of your actual torso. Can you imagine having to wear a hoodie like that? Like, if we were proportioned like cartoon characters, where our heads were the same size, if not bigger than our torsos, then a hoodie would be one of the most awkward garments for us to wear. For the hood to be big enough to actually fit over our heads when we're not wearing it, it would practically drag on the ground behind us like a cape. But I digress. The really most involved sculpting had to be the tail, because first of all was cutting off the extra tail and then reconfiguring the whole thing so that like it's symmetrical with only one tail on, and then sculpting everything over so it looks like a thicker squirrel tail. Whereas foxtails, they are like really skinny at the base and they get bigger in the middle. A squirrel tail is kind of poofy all the way, so just had to sculpt the whole thing a little bit wider. So the paint job on Conker is actually relatively simple. He's all just orange, and then there's like some beigeish highlights where the lighter points are. Although, like, I don't really recall ever seeing a squirrel that has a dipstick on its tail. I mean, admittedly, I've never seen a British red squirrel before, but I don't know, that dipstick kind of seems like something you would see on a fox more than a squirrel. As far as I was always aware, squirrels were pretty universally one color. Unless, aside from like the two-tone thing with the belly patch, but, their tails are always one color, so I'm trying to get at. Okay, I guess I've digressed long enough. Here's the completed Conker figure. He doesn't have any wrist or ankle articulation because I had to glue those bits on, but his neck does turn. It's a little awkward and stiff because it's, the friction of 3D printed plastic on the latex plastic of the figure, so I wouldn't recommend pushing it too hard, but if you're careful enough, you can get him into poses, whether you want to tripod him with his tail or, like, lean him forward for a more dynamic pose so you can put the tail up in the air. And everyone's favorite little foul-mouthed red squirrel is ready for action. That's what I call a bowel movement. Da-da-da-dun. If you don't get that reference, you probably aren't old enough to play the game, so you really shouldn't look into it. One more thing. I kind of found it amusing how this is kind of the exact opposite design philosophy as Blade the Shark, the other figure I made for him. Because Blade uses a non-Sonic figure's torso and limbs, but the head, hands, and feet come from actual Sonic figures. Meanwhile, Conker uses 3D printed head, hands, and feet, which don't come from real Sonic figures, but the torso is an actual Sonic figure. So, like, between the two of these guys, there's one Sonic figure's worth of parts. Isn't that kind of funny? I think it's kind of funny. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video, and this is Wake Angel 2001 signing off.